I stood frozen at my father's retirement party, watching my brother-in-law Marcus accept the keys to Thompson Construction, the family business I spent 15 years building from the ground up. The room erupted in applause while my world crumbled. My father's words echoed, "Marcus has shown the leadership and stability this company needs." My wife Sarah squeezed my hand, but I could barely breathe. 23 years of sacrifice missed birthdays, and 70-hour weeks meant nothing. My own father just declared me a failure in front of everyone who mattered. The humiliation cut deeper than any physical wound I'd ever endured on a construction site. As guests continued celebrating around me, my mind raced back to that summer when I was 15, begging Dad to let me work with the crew instead of flipping burgers like other kids my age. Thompson Construction employed only 12 people, then operating out of a cramped office above Murphy's hardware store on Main Street. While my classmates spent summers at the community pool or playing baseball, I learned to frame houses under the scorching Illinois sun. My hands developed calluses before I could legally drive. Every morning at 6 sharp, I'd climb into Dad's rusted Ford pickup, listening to him explain the intricacies of load-bearing walls and foundation settling. Those early lessons shaped not just my understanding of construction, but my entire work ethic. When senior year arrived, guidance counselors pushed college brochures toward me, but I already knew my path. Northwestern Illinois University offered night classes in construction management, and I enrolled while working full-time days. 4 years of sleeping. 3 hours nightly studying by lamplight after 12-hour shifts, but I earned that degree with a 3.7 GPA. Thompson Construction grew alongside my education. Dad trusted me with increasingly complex projects, and I delivered every single time. The Riverside Elementary expansion that came in $20,000 under budget, the downtown revitalization that finished 2 weeks early, the luxury subdivision that earned us recognition from the Chamber of Commerce. By 28, I'd transformed our small operation into the region's most respected construction company. Our workforce expanded to 87 skilled employees. Annual revenue jumped from $800,000 to $4.2 million. Major contractors from Chicago started calling us for partnerships. Everything I touched seemed to flourish, and Dad beamed with pride at every family gathering, introducing me as the brains behind our success. Then Jessica brought Marcus home 3 years ago. My sister had always chosen boyfriends poorly, but Marcus seemed different. Tall, articulate, impeccably dressed in pressed khakis and polo shirts that never showed wrinkles. His handshake felt firm, his smile warm, and his questions about the business demonstrated genuine interest rather than polite small talk. As a real estate agent with Pinnacle Properties, he understood profit margins and client relations. "Your brothers built something incredible here," Marcus told Dad during that first family barbecue, gesturing toward our equipment yard, visible through the kitchen window. The organizational systems, the quality control processes, the client retention rates. Most companies this size struggle with scalability, but Dominic's created sustainable growth patterns. Dad's chest puffed with pride, hearing his son praised in such professional terms. Marcus possessed a vocabulary that impressed my father, speaking about operational efficiency and market positioning. With the confidence of someone who'd studied business at Northwestern or DePaul. I appreciated his recognition of my work, though something about his delivery felt slightly rehearsed. Their relationship deepened quickly. Marcus joined Dad for weekly golf rounds at Oakwood Country Club, where they'd discuss industry trends and economic forecasts. Dad started quoting Marcus's insights about emerging market opportunities and strategic diversification. These conversations made Dad feel sophisticated, like he was operating at a higher business level than simple construction contracts. The engagement announcement surprised nobody, but Marcus's integration into family dynamics accelerated dramatically. Suddenly, he had opinions about Thompson Construction's direction. During Sunday dinners, he'd casually mention concerns about our project timelines or suggest modernization strategies that successful companies implemented. "Dominic works incredibly hard," Marcus would say, but sometimes dedication can become tunnel vision. Fresh perspectives often identify blind spots that experience overlooks. These comments seemed supportive, initially framed as constructive observations rather than criticisms. Dad nodded thoughtfully, appreciating Marcus's objective analysis of situations he'd been too close to evaluate properly. I dismissed the remarks as harmless input from someone trying to contribute to family discussions. The shift became noticeable 6 months before the retirement party. Dad started questioning decisions I'd made confidently for years. A delayed permit for the Riverside Medical Center project prompted lectures about project management fundamentals. A client complaint about paint color selections led to discussions about quality control protocols. Problems that previously would have been dismissed as normal business fluctuations suddenly became evidence of systemic issues. Marcus positioned himself as the voice of reason during these conversations, defending me while subtly reinforcing Dad's concerns. "Dominic's under tremendous pressure managing everything alone," he'd explain. "Even the most capable leaders need support systems and oversight mechanisms." I began noticing Marcus's presence during my private conversations with Dad about business matters. He'd appear with coffee or documents, lingering just long enough to absorb our discussions about upcoming projects or financial decisions. When I mentioned this pattern to Sarah, she suggested I was becoming paranoid due to work stress. The breaking point arrived during a particularly challenging period when 3 separate projects faced weather delays. Dad summoned me to his study for what I expected would be a routine progress update. Instead, I found Marcus seated across from Dad's desk, legal pad covered with handwritten notes. "We need to discuss some troubling patterns," Dad announced, adjusting his reading glasses. Marcus opened a leather portfolio containing photocopied documents, project timelines, cost overruns, client communications, employee complaints. Every mistake, every delay, every dissatisfied customer from the past 18 months meticulously cataloged and cross-referenced. "Marcus has been helping me analyze our operational efficiency," Dad explained, "and the data reveals concerning trends in leadership effectiveness and decision-making processes." My blood turned cold as I recognized the scope of Marcus's documentation. This wasn't casual observation or helpful analysis. This was deliberate surveillance, systematic collection of evidence designed to build a case against my competence. Marcus had been studying my every move, waiting for opportunities to document failures while ignoring successes. I never wanted to bring this up. Marcus said, his voice heavy with manufactured reluctance. "Dominic's family and I respect his dedication. But ignoring these patterns wouldn't serve the company's best interests or protect the employees who depend on Thompson Construction for their livelihoods." The betrayal hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. For months, I'd welcomed Marcus's interest in our business, interpreted his questions as genuine curiosity rather than intelligence gathering. He'd been building a comprehensive case against me, positioning himself as the solution to problems he was simultaneously documenting and amplifying. Dad's trust in Marcus was complete. Where he saw his son's defensive reactions to legitimate concerns, he saw his future son-in-law's mature acceptance of difficult responsibilities. Marcus had perfectly calibrated his approach, never appearing ambitious or self-serving, always reluctantly identifying issues that someone needed to address for the family's protection. That night, I sat in my truck in the driveway for 2 hours, watching lights move through our house as Sarah prepared dinner and checked homework with our neighbors' kids. The foundation of everything I'd built was cracking, and I had no idea how to stop the collapse that Marcus had set in motion with surgical precision. The following Monday morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise, determined to understand how Marcus had gained such influence over my father's perception of my abilities. Something about his polished presentation and business vocabulary nagged at me. Real estate agents dealt with contracts and negotiations, but Marcus spoke with the authority of someone with formal business education and corporate experience. I started with basic research, searching online for Marcus's professional background and credentials. Pinnacle Properties' website featured his photograph and biography, describing him as a distinguished sales professional specializing in luxury residential properties. However, the details remained vague about his previous experience or educational background. Bill Rodriguez had served as our family accountant for 16 years, handling both Thompson Construction's books and Dad's personal finances. A straightforward man who'd built his practice on discretion and accuracy. Bill rarely offered unsolicited opinions about client affairs. When I scheduled a lunch meeting ostensibly to discuss quarterly tax projections, his uncomfortable demeanor suggested he'd been wrestling with concerns he couldn't professionally voice. Dominic. Bill began carefully stirring sugar into his coffee at the corner booth of Mel's Diner. I need to ask some questions about recent financial activities that concern your father's accounts. My stomach tightened. What kind of activities? Large cash withdrawals, unusual expenditures, payments to vendors I can't identify. Bill opened a manila folder containing bank statements and receipts. Your father's been spending money in patterns that don't match his typical behavior. Expensive purchases, luxury services, gifts that seem inconsistent with his retirement budget. The evidence painted a troubling picture. Dad had withdrawn $8,000 in cash over 6 weeks with no documentation about how the money was spent. Credit card statements showed charges at high-end sporting goods stores, premium restaurants, and exclusive golf courses. A $5,000 payment to Alpine Adventures LLC corresponded with the fishing trip to Alaska that Marcus had supposedly organized and funded as a generous gesture. Bill, who's been advising Dad about these expenditures, that's what worries me, Bill admitted. Someone's been encouraging spending that could impact his retirement security, but they're presenting it as investments in his happiness and well-being. I've tried discussing fiscal responsibility, but he dismisses my concerns as excessive caution. The picture became clearer as Bill shared additional details. The golf club membership that Dad believed was Marcus's gift actually appeared on Dad's credit card as a $4,000 annual fee. The vintage whiskey collection, the professional-grade fishing equipment, the leather recliners for his study, all purchased with Dad's money, while Marcus received credit for generosity. I left the diner with copies of the financial records, my mind racing with implications. If Marcus was manipulating Dad's spending while taking credit for expensive gifts, what other deceptions might be hidden beneath his charming facade? The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation maintains public records for all licensed real estate professionals. Marcus Cross was listed as a licensed agent with Pinnacle Properties, but his status showed suspended as of 6 months ago. The reason, investigation pending regarding fiduciary violations and client fund irregularities. My hands trembled as I printed the official documents. Marcus hadn't mentioned any professional difficulties during family discussions about his career. Instead, he'd been sharing stories about successful sales and satisfied clients maintaining the appearance of a thriving practice while his license remained suspended for financial misconduct. Further investigation revealed the scope of Marcus's troubles. Cook County court records showed 2 civil lawsuits filed against him by former clients. Ethel and Walter Morrison, ages 73 and 76, alleged that Marcus had diverted $47,000 from their escrow account during a home sale transaction. The money intended for their retirement relocation to Arizona vanished while Marcus provided explanations about processing delays and bank transfers. The second lawsuit involved the Hendricks family first-time homebuyers who lost their down payment and closing costs when Marcus allegedly used their escrow funds for personal expenses. $28,000 that represented years of savings gone while their dream of home ownership crumbled. The criminal investigation file painted an even darker picture. Marcus had systematically accessed client escrow accounts using the funds for personal expenditures while assuring victims that temporary banking issues would resolve quickly. The pattern suggested deliberate fraud rather than accounting errors or administrative mistakes. I realized with horrifying clarity that Marcus had been using stolen money to finance his charm offensive with my father. The expensive fishing trip, the golf membership, the luxury gifts, all funded through theft from vulnerable clients who trusted him with their life savings. Dad's admiration for Marcus's generous spirit and business success was based entirely on criminal proceeds. That evening, I confronted Jessica in her apartment, spreading the evidence across her coffee table while she stared in shocked silence. The court documents the licensing suspension, the victim statements, everything that revealed Marcus's true character. "Jess, did you know about any of this?" Her face crumpled as tears began flowing. I suspected something was wrong, but I was too scared to ask questions. He told me the license suspension was temporary, some bureaucratic misunderstanding about paperwork deadlines. What about the money problems, the client lawsuits? He said former clients were trying to blame him for their own financial mistakes, that jealous competitors were spreading rumors to damage his reputation. Jessica's voice broke as she continued. I wanted to believe him because the alternative was too horrible to accept. She revealed details that completed the picture of Marcus's manipulation and control. When she'd questioned inconsistencies in his stories, he'd accused her of lacking faith in their relationship. When she'd suggested they postpone the wedding until his legal troubles resolved, he'd threatened to leave immediately, taking everything they'd built together. He said I was the only good thing in his life, that losing me would destroy any chance he had for redemption. Jessica sobbed. I felt responsible for supporting him through difficult times, but now I realize he was using my loyalty to hide his crimes. The most chilling revelation came when Jessica described Marcus's research into our family dynamics. He'd studied Dad's personality, identifying his desire for respect and sophisticated conversation. He'd learned about Thompson Construction's history, understanding exactly how to position himself as the business-savvy outsider who could provide fresh perspective and modern management techniques. He wasn't just dating me, Jessica whispered. He was infiltrating our family with a specific plan to gain Dad's trust and eventually take control of the business. The weight of betrayal pressed down on my chest like a collapsed beam. Marcus hadn't stumbled into our lives through coincidence or genuine attraction to my sister. He'd targeted the Thompson family after researching our assets and vulnerabilities, executing a calculated plan to steal everything we'd spent generations building. But even armed with this evidence, I underestimated the depth of Marcus's preparation and the ruthless creativity he'd display when his carefully constructed deception faced exposure. I spent the weekend organizing evidence and preparing for the family meeting that would expose Marcus's deception. Sarah helped me create a comprehensive presentation, the suspended real estate license, the client lawsuits, the financial fraud charges, the pattern of escrow account theft. The documentation was overwhelming and undeniable. Monday morning, I called Dad and Jessica requesting an emergency family meeting to discuss urgent matters affecting Thompson Construction and our family's financial security. Dad agreed reluctantly, expressing annoyance about dramatic interruptions to his retirement routine. Jessica promised to attend, but sounded terrified about the confrontation she knew was coming. Marcus, however, had been monitoring family communications more closely than I'd realized. Tuesday morning at 7:30, Dad's phone call shattered my confidence. His voice shook with rage and betrayal as he summoned me to his study immediately. When I arrived 15 minutes later, I found Marcus seated behind Dad's desk, surrounded by financial documents and computer printouts that I'd never seen before. "Sit down." "Dominic." Dad commanded, his face gray with shock and disappointment. "Marcus has discovered something that explains the problems we've been having with company performance." Marcus looked up with perfectly calculated reluctance, as if delivering news that caused him personal pain. "I wish I didn't have to show you this, but protecting Thompson Construction has to come before family loyalty." The document spread across Dad's desk painted a devastating picture of systematic embezzlement. Altered invoices showing inflated material costs with the differences apparently diverted to personal accounts. Bank statements with highlighted deposits that didn't correspond to legitimate company income. Expense reports for equipment purchases that couldn't be located in our inventory. These discrepancies total almost $75,000 over the past 18 months. Marcus explained, his voice heavy with manufactured sorrow. The pattern suggests systematic diversion of company funds through invoice manipulation and false expense reporting. My blood turned to ice as I recognized the sophistication of the frame-up. Every document appeared authentic, complete with official letterheads and account numbers. The paper trail looked comprehensive and damning, suggesting months of careful theft and deception. "This can't be real," I stammered, reaching for the bank statements. "Dad, these numbers are fabricated. Someone's doctored these records to make me look guilty." "The evidence speaks for itself," Marcus replied sadly. "I've been trying to find alternative explanations for weeks, hoping I was misunderstanding the financial irregularities. But the pattern is too consistent and too sophisticated to be accounting errors." Dad's face reflected complete devastation. His son, the pride of Thompson Construction, apparently had been stealing from the family business while accepting praise for its success. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss because it shattered Dad's fundamental trust in my character. "How could you do this to us?" Dad's voice cracked with pain. "We gave you everything, trusted you with our entire legacy, and you've been robbing us blind while we celebrated your achievements." My desperate attempts at explanation sounded exactly like the panicked lies of a caught criminal. Every protestation of innocence seemed to confirm guilt. Every claim of frame-up appeared to be deflection tactics. Marcus had timed the revelation perfectly, presenting evidence before I could expose his own crimes. "I understand Dominic's shock," Marcus said gently, "but denial is a natural response when someone realizes they've been caught. The important thing now is protecting Thompson Construction and ensuring this theft doesn't destroy everything the Thompson family has built." Sarah arrived in the middle of the confrontation, her face pale with horror as she absorbed the accusations and evidence. She stood behind my chair, hands on my shoulders, but I could feel her confusion and doubt as she examined the seemingly authentic financial records. "Marcus, this is impossible," Sarah said firmly. "Dominic would never steal from his own family. Someone's created false evidence to frame him." "I hope you're right," Marcus replied with perfect sincerity, "but we can't ignore documented proof because we want to believe in someone's innocence. The Thompson family's financial security depends on addressing this situation responsibly." Dad made the devastating decision to freeze all company accounts pending a complete financial audit. He contacted our bank, our insurance company, and our attorney describing the suspected embezzlement and requesting immediate protective measures. Thompson Construction's operations ground to a halt as vendors couldn't be paid and payroll was suspended. The nuclear option that Marcus had prepared became clear as the meeting continued. He'd created such convincing evidence of my guilt that any attempt to expose his own crimes would appear to be desperate deflection tactics. The timing ensured that my accusations would sound exactly like the lies of a cornered criminal trying to shift blame to innocent parties. "Dad, please listen to me," I pleaded, pulling out my own evidence about Marcus's suspended license and client fraud cases. "Marcus is the one who's been stealing, using embezzled money to buy your trust while framing me for his crimes." "Enough," Dad's voice thundered through the study. "You're caught red-handed with documented proof, and now you're trying to destroy an innocent man's reputation to save yourself. Marcus has been nothing but generous and supportive to this family." Marcus's performance reached Oscar-worthy levels as he defended me against my own accusations. "Desperation makes people say horrible things," he explained to Dad. "Dominic's probably been living with guilt for months, and now that pressure is causing him to lash out at anyone nearby." The psychological manipulation was flawless. By defending me while I attacked him, Marcus appeared to be the mature, forgiving victim of false accusations, while I seemed increasingly unhinged and vindictive. Every piece of legitimate evidence I presented about his crimes appeared to confirm his narrative about my desperate attempts at deflection. Jessica sat silent throughout the confrontation, paralyzed between loyalty to her brother and terror of Marcus's retaliation. She'd seen his capacity for manipulation and control, understood that challenging him could result in complete destruction of her life. Her silence felt like abandonment, but I recognized the impossible position Marcus had created for her. The meeting ended with Dad's announcement that he was considering criminal charges for embezzlement. He'd already contacted Attorney General's office about potential prosecution, and he was removing my access to all company accounts and properties. Thompson Construction would continue operating under Marcus's temporary management until the legal situation resolved. "I'm changing my will to remove you entirely," Dad said, his voice hollow with grief. "I can't risk leaving stolen property to the person who stole it." As I walked to my truck in stunned silence, I realized Marcus had executed the perfect crime. He'd stolen money from vulnerable clients, used those funds to buy my father's trust, framed me for embezzlement, and positioned himself to inherit everything my family had built. The elegance of his plan was matched only by its ruthless efficiency. But I was about to discover that Marcus's ambitions extended far beyond stealing one family's construction business. He was part of a sophisticated criminal organization that had perfected the art of destroying families while stealing their life's work. The following week transformed my life into a nightmare of legal threats and financial pressure. Dad followed through on his promise to freeze company assets, leaving me without income or access to resources I'd spent years building. Sarah and I burned through our savings, paying attorney fees and living expenses, while I scrambled to find construction work that didn't require references from Thompson Construction. Marcus moved quickly to consolidate control, arriving at the office each morning in pressed suits and leather briefcases that conveyed executive authority. He scheduled meetings with major clients, assuring them that Thompson Construction's temporary leadership transition wouldn't affect project timelines or quality standards. Several contractors who'd worked with us for years expressed confusion about my sudden absence, but Marcus's explanations about family health issues satisfied most inquiries. I found work with Riverside Construction, a smaller outfit that specialized in residential remodeling. The owner, Joe Martinez, had competed with Thompson Construction for years, but maintained professional respect for my abilities. When I explained that family conflicts had led to my departure without going into details about embezzlement accusations, Joe offered me a position as project supervisor. "Your reputation speaks for itself," Joe said during our interview. "Whatever's happening with your family business, I know quality work when I see it." The job paid 60% of my previous salary, but it provided income while I navigated the legal crisis. More importantly, it gave me flexibility to investigate Marcus's background during evenings and weekends. I was convinced that his frame-up scheme was too sophisticated for an amateur criminal, suggesting connections to organized fraud networks. Detective Linda Harrison worked white-collar crime cases for the Illinois State Police, specializing in financial fraud and embezzlement investigations. When I contacted her office requesting consultation about suspected criminal activity, she agreed to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Springfield. Linda was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with sharp eyes that suggested extensive experience dealing with financial criminals. She listened patiently as I described Marcus's infiltration of our family, the embezzlement frame-up, and my suspicions about organized criminal activity. "Your story has elements I've seen before," Linda said, reviewing copies of the evidence I'd gathered. "The systematic approach, the long-term planning, the sophisticated documentation. This isn't amateur hour." She accessed law enforcement databases using Marcus's name and physical description, searching for patterns that might connect him to other fraud cases. The results sent chills down my spine as Linda printed records from Oregon and Nevada showing identical schemes targeting family construction businesses. Martin Cross, also known as Marcus Cross Mitchell Carter and Michael Carson. Linda read from the computer screen. Wanted in connection with 3 separate cases involving family business infiltration and asset theft. The Oregon case involved the Brennan Family Concrete Company, a third-generation business destroyed after Martin infiltrated through marriage to the owner's daughter. Within 2 years, he'd gained control of operations, liquidated assets, and disappeared, leaving the family bankrupt and facing criminal charges for fraud they hadn't committed. The Nevada case followed an identical pattern. Mountain View Construction, owned by the Rodriguez family for 40 years, collapsed after Martin married into the family and systematically stole equipment contracts and client relationships. The family patriarch died of a heart attack during the FBI investigation, never learning that his trusted son-in-law was actually a professional criminal. "This is what terrifies me," Linda explained, showing me surveillance photographs from the Nevada investigation. "Martin doesn't work alone. He's part of a crew that specializes in this type of long-term fraud. Document forgers, inside banking contacts, intimidation specialists. They research target families for months before making contact." The scope of Marcus's preparation became clear as Linda shared intelligence from federal investigations. His crew had been watching the Thompson family for almost 2 years before Jessica's first encounter with Marcus at a charity fundraiser. They'd studied our financial records, analyzed family dynamics, and identified psychological pressure points that could be exploited. "Your sister wasn't randomly targeted," Linda continued. "They researched her social activities, learned about her relationship history, and positioned Marcus to meet her when she was most vulnerable to his manipulation. The professional surveillance explained details that had puzzled me for months. Marcus's intimate knowledge of construction industry terminology, his understanding of Thompson Construction's client relationships, his ability to anticipate Dad's reactions to specific situations. He'd been studying us like specimens in a laboratory, preparing for systematic destruction of everything we'd built. The terrifying part is what happens next," Linda warned. "Once they gain control of the business assets, they liquidate everything quickly and move to the next target. But families who resist or investigate too deeply sometimes face physical intimidation or worse." Linda showed me photographs from the Nevada case that made my blood freeze. The Rodriguez family's garage had been burned down after they'd started asking questions about their son-in-law's background. The message was, "Clear, stop investigating, or face escalating consequences." "We need to be extremely careful how we proceed," Linda explained. "If Martin realizes we're onto him, he might accelerate his timeline or decide that eliminating witnesses is necessary for his own protection." She outlined a plan to gather evidence while avoiding detection. I would continue working and maintaining the appearance of a defeated former business owner. Meanwhile, Linda would coordinate with federal agencies to build a comprehensive case against Marcus's entire crew. The process would take weeks or months, but it offered the best chance of stopping them permanently. "Dominic, I need you to understand something important," Linda said as our meeting concluded. "These people have destroyed multiple families and stolen millions of dollars. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone who threatens their operation." That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at surveillance photographs of Marcus with associates I'd never seen before. Men with criminal records including assault, extortion, and witness intimidation. Sarah found me there at 2 in the morning, reviewing case files by lamplight. "We need to consider relocating temporarily," I told her, explaining Linda's warnings about escalating danger. "If Marcus realizes I'm investigating his background, he might decide we know too much to be left alone." Sarah's face reflected the same fear that was gnawing at my stomach. We'd thought we were dealing with a lying, manipulative brother-in-law. Instead, we'd discovered a professional criminal organization that eliminated obstacles to their carefully planned theft operations. "What about Jessica?" Sarah asked. "If Marcus is as dangerous as these files suggest, she might be in immediate physical danger." The weight of responsibility pressed down on me like a collapsed building. I couldn't expose Marcus without putting Jessica at risk, but I couldn't allow him to destroy Thompson Construction and steal everything Dad had worked his entire life to build. The choice between protecting my sister and saving my family's legacy felt impossible. But Linda had explained that Marcus's crew typically avoided violence unless they felt cornered or exposed. As long as their plan proceeded smoothly, they preferred to maintain their cover and complete the theft without complications. The key was gathering enough evidence to stop them while avoiding any actions that might trigger their more dangerous responses. I was about to learn just how carefully Marcus had planned for every contingency, including the possibility that someone might discover his true identity and criminal background. 2 weeks later, Linda Harrison called with news that changed everything. We're ready to move against Marcus and his crew, but we need your help to catch them in the act of liquidating Thompson Construction's assets. The FBI had been monitoring Marcus's communications and financial activities, discovering plans to strip the company of valuable equipment and transfer contracts to shell corporations controlled by his criminal organization. The timeline was aggressive, with most assets scheduled for disposal within 30 days. "We need to set up a controlled operation," Linda explained during our meeting at the state police headquarters. "You'll wear a wire during a planned confrontation where Marcus admits to the frame-up and reveals details about the Oregon and Nevada operations. The plan required me to request a meeting with Marcus and Dad, supposedly to confess to the embezzlement charges and cooperate with transferring remaining company access codes. The wire would capture Marcus's admissions about fabricating evidence, while hidden cameras would document the presence of his criminal associates. This is extremely dangerous," Linda emphasized. "Marcus's crew includes violent criminals who've eliminated witnesses in other states. If they suspect surveillance, you could be seriously hurt or killed." Sarah refused to let me participate until Linda explained that Marcus's organization was already planning to handle the family situation after completing the asset liquidation. We weren't safe regardless of what actions we took, so the controlled operation offered our best chance of survival and justice. "These people don't leave loose ends," Linda said grimly. "Once they've stolen everything, they eliminate anyone who could identify them or testify about their methods." I contacted Dad and requested the meeting, explaining that I was ready to confess and cooperate fully with law enforcement. Dad's voice reflected exhaustion and grief as he agreed to gather at his study Thursday evening. Marcus would attend to witness my confession and ensure proper documentation of my admissions. Wednesday night, FBI technicians fitted me with sophisticated recording equipment that was virtually undetectable. The wire transmitted to monitoring equipment positioned in unmarked vehicles surrounding Dad's house. Backup teams waited 3 blocks away, ready to respond if violence erupted. "Remember, we need Marcus to admit fabricating evidence against you," Linda instructed. "Try to get him talking about the Oregon and Nevada operations, but don't push too hard if he resists. Your safety is more important than perfect evidence." Thursday evening arrived with unseasonably cold October weather that matched my emotional state. I sat in my truck outside Dad's house, watching lights glow through familiar windows, while federal agents checked their equipment and confirmed communication systems. The meeting began in Dad's study with Marcus seated behind the desk like he'd already assumed ownership of Thompson Construction. Dad occupied his usual armchair, looking older and more frail than I'd ever seen him. The stress of recent weeks had aged him dramatically, turning his hair completely gray and adding deep lines around his eyes. "I appreciate you being here to witness this," I told Marcus, following the FBI's suggested script. "Dad deserves to hear the truth about what I've done to Thompson Construction." Marcus nodded gravely, maintaining his performance as the reluctant family protector forced to address unpleasant responsibilities. "I know this is difficult, Dominic, but honesty is the first step toward making things right. I've been stealing from the company for almost 2 years. I continued, each word tasting like poison. The invoice alterations, the false expense reports, the diverted funds, everything you documented was accurate." Dad's face crumpled with pain as he listened to what he believed was my confession. The sight of his anguish nearly broke my resolve, but I forced myself to continue the charade that would hopefully save our family. "What I don't understand," I said, looking directly at Marcus, "is how you discovered the theft so quickly after joining our family. The documentation you presented was incredibly detailed and comprehensive." Marcus's confidence grew as he believed his victory was complete. I've always been good with numbers and patterns. Once I started reviewing company finances, the discrepancies became obvious to anyone with business training. But some of those invoices were altered so skillfully, I pressed. The banking records, the expense reports. It would take professional expertise to detect such sophisticated fraud. "Experience teaches you what to look for," Marcus replied smugly. "I've seen similar patterns in other family businesses where trusted employees abused their positions. The admission hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Marcus had just confirmed his involvement in multiple family business fraud cases, exactly the evidence Linda needed to connect him to the Oregon and Nevada investigations. The meeting was interrupted by an unexpected knock at the front door. Dad excused himself to answer, returning moments later with the expression of confusion and concern. "There's a man outside who says he needs to speak with Marcus urgently about business matters." Marcus's composure cracked slightly as he realized his crew was making unscheduled contact. "I'll handle this quickly," he said, stepping toward the front door. Through the study window, I watched Marcus converse with a heavy-set man whose aggressive body language suggested bad news. The conversation became heated as Marcus gestured angrily and the visitor pointed toward Dad's house with obvious threats. "Something's wrong," I told Dad. "That man doesn't look like legitimate business associates." Marcus returned to the study with barely controlled fury, his carefully maintained facade finally slipping. "We have a problem, old man," he snarled at Dad. "Someone's been asking questions about my background, and that threatens everything we've worked to build here." Dad's confusion was evident as he struggled to understand Marcus's sudden personality change. "What are you talking about? What background questions? Your precious son has been investigating me, trying to find dirt to justify his own theft," Marcus spat. "But he stumbled into information that could destroy legitimate business operations." The transformation was stunning as Marcus abandoned his polite professional demeanor and revealed the cold criminal beneath. His voice became harsh and threatening, his posture aggressive and intimidating. Dad shrank back in his chair, finally seeing Marcus's true nature. "I've spent 2 years infiltrating your pathetic family and positioning myself to take control of this business." Marcus continued his rant. "Do you think I'm going to let some amateur investigation destroy years of careful planning?" Dad's face reflected horror as he realized the scope of Marcus's deception. "You've been lying to us about everything." "Of course I've been lying, you gullible fool," Marcus laughed bitterly. "The real estate career, the generous gifts, the concern for Thompson Construction's success. All carefully calculated to gain your trust and steal everything you've built." Through the window, I could see more men arriving, parking blocking vehicles at both ends of the street. Marcus's crew was implementing contingency plans for dealing with compromised operations, and those plans apparently included eliminating witnesses. "The embezzlement evidence was fabricated," Marcus admitted proudly. "Every invoice, every bank statement, every expense report. I have associates who specialize in creating convincing financial fraud that destroys reputations and eliminates competition." Dad's devastation was complete as he understood that he'd destroyed his relationship with his innocent son based on lies created by a professional criminal. "Dominic never stole anything. Your son is guilty of being too honest and trusting to recognize a sophisticated con game," Marcus sneered. "But his investigation has created problems that require permanent solutions." The threat was unmistakable as Marcus pulled his phone and began texting instructions to his crew. I realized the FBI surveillance was about to become a life-or-death situation as Marcus prepared to eliminate everyone who could testify against his criminal organization. "Dad, we need to get out of here right now," I said, standing and moving toward the door. "Nobody's going anywhere," Marcus replied, blocking our exit. "My associates are already positioned to handle anyone who tries to leave or call for help." The trap had sprung, but not the one the FBI had planned. Marcus had detected the investigation and was implementing violent contingency protocols that would eliminate all witnesses to his crimes. Through the study window, I could see armed men surrounding the house while federal agents remained unaware of the escalating danger. The wire capturing every word of Marcus's confessions would be useless if none of us survived to testify about his crimes. Marcus's phone buzzed with text messages as his crew reported their positions around Dad's house. The casual confidence he'd displayed moments earlier evolved into cold calculation as he processed the tactical situation developing outside. Tommy's watching the back door. Jake's covering the driveway and Carlos is monitoring police communications. Marcus announced reading updates from his associates. Nobody gets in or out without my permission. Dad struggled to process the rapid transformation of his trusted future son-in-law into a threatening criminal who'd apparently been planning violence against our family. Marcus, what are you talking about? Why would you need armed men outside my house? Because your son's investigation has compromised a very profitable operation, Marcus explained with chilling matter-of-factness. We've spent months positioning ourselves to liquidate Thompson Construction's assets, and I won't allow amateur detective work to destroy years of planning. The scope of Marcus's preparation became clear as he described the systematic theft that had been proceeding parallel to his frame-up campaign. Equipment had been relocated to storage facilities controlled by shell corporations. Major contracts had been secretly transferred to companies owned by his criminal organization. Client relationships were being redirected to businesses that Marcus's crew would control after Thompson Construction's collapse. By next week, Thompson Construction would have existed only on paper, Marcus continued. All valuable assets transferred, all profitable relationships, redirected, all financial resources drained. Your family would have been left with debt and legal problems while we disappeared with everything of value. I realized Marcus was revealing details he would never share with intended survivors. His casual admissions about the Oregon and Nevada operations, his descriptions of document forgery and witness intimidation, his explanations of systematic asset theft. He was talking like someone who assumed his audience wouldn't live to repeat his confessions. Marcus, Jessica doesn't know about any of this, I said desperately. She's innocent in whatever you've been planning. You don't need to hurt her. Marcus's laugh was devoid of warmth or humanity. Jessica served her purpose as my entry point into your family, but she's also heard too much during pillow talk about business operations and future plans. Loose ends create problems in this type of work. The casual dismissal of my sister's life as a loose end triggered rage that overwhelmed my fear. This monster had manipulated Jessica's emotions, used her love as a weapon against our family, and now planned to murder her because she represented a potential threat to his criminal organization. Dad's voice was barely a whisper as he asked, "What about Thompson Construction's employees? The families who depend on those jobs?" "Unemployment is temporary," Marcus shrugged. "They'll find other work or they won't. My concern is protecting profitable operations that benefit my actual associates." The complete absence of conscience was stunning. 87 families would lose their incomes when Thompson Construction collapsed, but Marcus viewed their suffering as acceptable collateral damage in his theft operation. The business that represented 3 generations of honest work and community service meant nothing beyond its liquidation value. Marcus's phone buzzed again, and his expression grew concerned as he read the message. Jake's reporting unusual activity 2 blocks away. Vehicles that might be law enforcement communication equipment patterns that suggest surveillance operations. My heart raced as I realized the FBI monitoring teams had been detected. Marcus's crew included professionals who understood law enforcement tactics and could recognize surveillance setups. The carefully planned, controlled operation was collapsing into a hostage situation with federal agents unable to provide immediate assistance. "It seems your confession meeting was more elaborate than simple family reconciliation," Marcus said, studying my face for confirmation of his suspicions. "Which means you're wearing recording equipment that's captured everything I've said about Oregon, Nevada, and asset liquidation." He moved closer, patting down my shirt and jacket until he located the wire transmitter. His smile was genuinely amused as he examined the sophisticated FBI equipment. "Very professional hardware," Marcus observed. "Federal quality, which explains the surveillance vehicles Jake spotted. Your investigation reached law enforcement levels rather than amateur family detective work." Marcus crushed the transmitter under his heel, severing communication with Linda Harrison and her backup teams. The federal agents positioned around the neighborhood could no longer monitor our situation or coordinate rescue operations. This changes the timeline significantly. Marcus announced texting rapid instructions to his crew. We need to implement emergency protocols for compromised operations. The next hour unfolded like a nightmare as Marcus's associates entered the house and began systematically destroying evidence while preparing for violent confrontation with law enforcement. Tommy, a scarred ex-convict with gang tattoos, ransacked Dad's study searching for documents that might connect Marcus to Thompson Construction. Jake, a nervous man with darting eyes, monitored police communications while preparing weapons for potential shootouts. Carlos, the crew's leader, possessed military bearing that suggested professional combat experience. He evaluated the tactical situation with calm efficiency, positioning associates at strategic windows while planning escape routes and defensive positions. Local police are establishing perimeters, Carlos reported to Marcus. FBI tactical teams are en route, estimated arrival 15 minutes. We need to decide whether to fight our way out or negotiate from a position of strength. Marcus considered the options while Dad and I sat helpless in the center of a criminal war council. The man who'd charmed our family with polite conversation and business insights was coordinating potential violence against law enforcement officers who were trying to protect us. Fighting brings federal heat that affects other operations, Marcus decided, but we can't afford to leave witnesses who understand the full scope of our activities. The implication was clear, as Marcus studied Dad and me with the calculating gaze of someone evaluating problems that needed permanent solutions. We'd learned too much about his criminal organization's methods and targets. Our survival represented ongoing threats to future operations. Carlos checked his watch and announced, FBI teams are 2 minutes out. We need final decisions about witness management and exit strategies. Secure the old man and the son, Marcus instructed. If negotiations fail, there are insurance against tactical assault. Tommy grabbed Dad, roughly pressing a knife against his throat, while Jake positioned himself behind my chair with a pistol against my head. The terror in Dad's eyes was heartbreaking, as he finally understood the consequences of trusting Marcus's carefully constructed facade. Marcus, please don't hurt my father, I begged. He's 71 years old and has never done anything to threaten you or your operation. His age is irrelevant, Marcus replied coldly. What matters is preventing testimony that could destroy profitable criminal enterprises spanning multiple states. The sound of approaching sirens filled the evening air as federal tactical teams arrived to attempt rescuing hostages from a situation that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. Through the study window, I could see armed agents taking positions behind vehicles and establishing communication equipment. A bullhorn crackled to life as FBI negotiators attempted to establish contact with Marcus and his crew. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We know you're inside with hostages. We want to resolve this situation peacefully with no one getting hurt. Marcus picked up Dad's landline phone and dialed the number announced by the negotiators. His voice was calm and professional as he explained his position to the FBI tactical commander. I have 2 hostages and associates prepared for extended resistance, Marcus announced. My demands are simple, guaranteed safe passage for my team and 6 hours before you attempt any tracking or pursuit. That's not something we can arrange, the FBI negotiator replied. But we can discuss alternatives that ensure everyone's safety. Then we have a problem, Marcus said, hanging up the phone. He looked at Carlos and nodded toward Dad and me. Implement Contingency Protocol 7. If they won't negotiate seriously, we'll provide motivation for more flexible thinking. Carlos raised his weapon toward Dad's head while Tommy tightened his grip on the knife at Dad's throat. I realized Marcus was prepared to murder his hostages rather than accept capture, and the FBI teams outside had no way of knowing how quickly the situation was deteriorating. But I was about to discover that Marcus had underestimated one crucial element in his carefully planned criminal operation: the depth of preparation his intended victims had undertaken, while he'd been focused on asset liquidation and evidence destruction. As Carlos prepared to execute Dad, the lights suddenly cut out throughout the house, plunging us into darkness, broken only by streetlights filtering through curtains. Emergency lighting systems that I'd installed in Dad's house 6 months earlier activated automatically, providing minimal illumination while confusing Marcus's crew about the source of the power failure. "Jake, get those lights back on." Marcus barked, but Jake was already discovering that the electrical panel had been locked down by remote control systems that I'd connected to Thompson Construction's emergency protocols. During the weeks I'd spent investigating Marcus, I'd also been secretly implementing security measures based on Linda Harrison's warnings about escalating danger. The emergency lighting, the remote electrical controls, the reinforced basement safe room, all installed under the guise of improving Dad's retirement home security. Tommy watched the old man. Carlos ordered, moving toward the window to assess FBI positions. Jake checked the basement for alternative electrical sources. But Jake's descent into the basement triggered motion sensors that activated a secondary protocol I'd programmed into Dad's security system. Steel shutters that appeared to be decorative window coverings suddenly locked into place, transforming the house into a reinforced containment system. "What the hell is happening?" Marcus demanded, realizing that his hostage's home was equipped with security features that were interfering with his crew's tactical options. Dominic installed upgraded security systems after we had break-ins in the neighborhood. Dad said, understanding for the first time that his son had been preparing for exactly this type of dangerous situation. The truth was more complex than Dad realized. I'd spent the past month working with Thompson Construction's electricians and security specialists to create a safe room and containment system that could protect family members while assisting law enforcement during violent confrontations. "The basement has independent power and communication systems," I explained to Marcus. "FBI teams can monitor everything that happens in this house, and the containment protocols prevent anyone from leaving until law enforcement deactivates them." Marcus's fury was magnificent as he realized his hostages had turned his crime scene into a high-tech prison. The steel shutters couldn't be opened without specialized equipment that his crew didn't possess. The electronic locks couldn't be overridden without access codes that only I controlled. "You planned this entire setup," Marcus accused, pressing his pistol against my head. "The confession meeting, the wire transmission, the law enforcement surveillance. You've been setting a trap while pretending to be a defeated victim." "Not exactly," I replied, activating the communication system that connected us directly to FBI tactical teams outside. "Linda, can you hear us clearly?" Detective Harrison's voice came through speakers hidden throughout Dad's study. "We have visual and audio monitoring of everything inside the house. Marcus, your crew is completely surrounded and contained. There's no escape route that doesn't result in federal prosecution." But the most stunning revelation was yet to come, as Dad stood up slowly and removed Tommy's knife from his throat with surprising strength and agility. "Son, I think it's time to explain the rest of our plan to Marcus," Dad said, his voice carrying authority that had been absent during recent weeks of apparent confusion and grief. Marcus's expression shifted from fury to incomprehension as he realized his elderly grieving victim was displaying capabilities that didn't match his carefully researched psychological profile. "Dad, how long have you known about Marcus's real identity?" I asked, following the script we'd rehearsed during secret meetings with Linda Harrison. "Bill Rodriguez brought me Marcus's criminal background 6 weeks ago." Dad admitted pulling documentation from his desk that proved he'd been investigating Marcus's past while appearing to trust him completely. "The suspended real estate license, the embezzlement charges, the pattern of family business infiltration. We've known about Oregon and Nevada from the beginning." The scope of our counter-deception began revealing itself as Dad explained how he'd coordinated with federal investigators while maintaining the appearance of a trusting, manipulated victim. "The financial records you showed me, Marcus, were obviously fabricated," Dad continued. "But we needed you to believe your plan was working while we gathered evidence about your criminal organization and prepared for your arrest." Marcus stared in shocked silence as he realized the Thompson family had been running a sophisticated counterintelligence operation while he'd believed he was manipulating naive victims. The golf games, the expensive gifts, the business discussions, Dad said. I was documenting everything you said about your criminal methods while appearing to be flattered by your attention and expertise. Linda Harrison's voice crackled through the communication system as she coordinated the final phase of the FBI operation. Marcus, we have recorded admissions about Oregon-Nevada document forgery, asset liquidation, and witness intimidation. Your crew members are providing additional testimony in exchange for reduced sentences. Tommy's already confessed to the garage arson in Nevada, Linda continued. Jake's describing the bank inside contacts who helped with fraudulent transfers. Carlos is explaining the intimidation tactics used against family members who asked too many questions. The criminal organization that had seemed so sophisticated and dangerous was collapsing as individual members chose cooperation over loyalty when faced with lengthy federal sentences. The beauty of your operation, Marcus, was also its weakness, I explained. You relied on family trust and emotional manipulation, but you never considered that families might be capable of more sophisticated responses than grief and confusion. Dad revealed the final element of our strategy as he opened his desk drawer and removed legal documents that made Marcus's face go completely white. Thompson Construction was legally transferred to a family trust 3 months ago, Dad announced. Even if you'd succeeded in gaining control through my death or incapacitation, you would have discovered that all assets were protected by irrevocable legal structures. The contracts, equipment, client relationships, and financial accounts that Marcus had spent 2 years positioning himself to steal had been legally shielded from any claims he might have made as my father's heir or business successor. Furthermore, Dad continued, the trust documents specifically exclude anyone with criminal convictions from any involvement in Thompson Construction's operations or management. Marcus's carefully planned theft operation had been targeting assets that were already protected from exactly the type of criminal infiltration he represented. As FBI tactical teams finally entered the house and arrested Marcus's crew, Dad and I embraced for the first time since the retirement party that had started this nightmare. I'm sorry I had to let you think I believed Marcus's accusations, Dad said, tears streaming down his weathered face. But Linda Harrison convinced us that our performance had to be completely convincing to gather the evidence needed to stop his organization permanently. I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to share my suspicions earlier, I replied. If I'd been honest about what I was discovering, we could have avoided weeks of pain and family conflict. The legal resolution proceeded swiftly as federal prosecutors built comprehensive cases against Marcus and his criminal organization. The evidence collected during our operation, combined with testimony from crew members seeking plea agreements, resulted in convictions for federal fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy charges. Marcus received a 25-year sentence for his leadership role in multiple family business infiltration schemes. Tommy, Jake, and Carlos received shorter sentences based on their cooperation and lesser roles in the organization. The stolen assets from Oregon and Nevada operations were recovered and returned to victim families. More importantly, Thompson Construction emerged stronger than before. The publicity surrounding Marcus's arrest and our family's successful counter-operation brought new clients who appreciated our integrity and sophistication. The company expanded into commercial development and security consulting, helping other family businesses protect themselves from similar criminal threats. Jessica recovered slowly from the emotional trauma of discovering that her fiancé was a professional criminal who'd manipulated her emotions as part of an elaborate theft scheme. With family support and professional counseling, she rebuilt her confidence and eventually started dating a genuinely honest man who worked as a teacher at the local high school. Sarah and I renewed our wedding vows on the first anniversary of Marcus's conviction, celebrating not just our marriage but our family's survival of a threat that had destroyed other families across multiple states. The experience strengthened our relationship by proving that we could face extreme challenges together and emerge victorious. The most meaningful outcome was my restored relationship with Dad, built on deeper trust and mutual respect than we'd ever shared before. Working together to stop Marcus's criminal organization proved that the Thompson family legacy wasn't just about construction expertise, but about courage, intelligence, and loyalty when facing existential threats. 6 months later, Dad and I stood side by side on a construction site supervising the foundation work for a new community center that Thompson Construction was building as a donation to the town that had supported us through the crisis. The project represented everything our family valued: honest work, community service, and permanent contributions to something larger than ourselves. Dominic, Dad said as we watched concrete being poured into forms that would support the building for generations, true character isn't proven when things are easy, but when everything you've built is threatened and you choose to rebuild rather than retreat. The life lesson that emerged from our ordeal was profound and lasting. Criminal organizations succeed by exploiting trust and manipulating emotions, but families who maintain honest communication and mutual support can overcome even sophisticated threats. The strength that comes from genuine relationships always proves more powerful than the temporary advantages gained through deception and manipulation. Thompson Construction continues operating today, employing over 100 skilled workers and contributing to community development projects throughout central Illinois. We've implemented security protocols that protect against criminal infiltration while maintaining the family atmosphere that has always been our greatest strength. Marcus's conviction helped federal investigators identify and stop similar criminal organizations operating in other states, protecting dozens of family businesses from the type of systematic theft that destroyed the companies in Oregon and Nevada. Our willingness to cooperate with law enforcement and share our counterintelligence methods contributed to a broader effort to combat organized fraud targeting small family businesses. The experience taught us that family loyalty, when combined with careful preparation and professional support, can overcome even the most sophisticated criminal threats. Trust remains essential for family relationships, but verification and communication provide the security that ensures trust is deserved and maintained. Most importantly, we learned that the Thompson family legacy isn't just about building structures that last for generations, but about building character that can withstand any test and emerge stronger than before. Now, I want to ask you something that I've been thinking about since this whole experience ended. Have you ever had someone close to you completely betray your trust? And if so, how did you find the strength to rebuild those relationships and move forward? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you and reminded you about the importance of family loyalty and communication, please hit that like button to help others find these stories. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding justice, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Please share this story with anyone who might be dealing with family business conflicts or trust issues. Sometimes people need to hear that it's possible to fight back against manipulation and win even when the odds seem impossible. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community that believes in the power of truth, justice, and family loyalty. I hope your own families stay strong, stay honest, and always support each other when challenges arise. Take care, and remember that no matter how sophisticated the threat, honest families who stick together can overcome anything.